Hello, my beautiful friends and my fellow sparkly space blobs, the goo and the cocoon, the emerging butterflies, all you beautiful transformational beings coming home to yourselves. We're here again, taking one breath together at a time, one step together at a time, creating one thought and feeling at a time, which is such an important modality right now, even though it might feel like it's not changing the world, revolutionizing everything overnight. These are important sacred moments, and it is a part of the great weaving. And each little drop of centering and coming home and kindness to ourselves and kindness on the journey matters right now. So I'm really so happy that you're sitting here with me today and that we get to explore life and the becoming and the returning home that is a lifetime, and the deeper themes that we sometimes move into as we head into the second half of life, which is what we're going to be talking about today as we explore what is known as the Uranus opposition. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this theme, have explored it a little bit yourself. Maybe you've already moved through it and you're just here to see if some of the things I'm talking about connect with you. Maybe you're about to move through your Uranus opposition like me. Maybe you're quite a ways away from the Uranus opposition, but this might be something that's really interesting to just kind of think about in the larger, broader sweep of your life and these larger arcs of time. I think this is such an interesting place of empowerment and beauty and curiosity, and is such a beautiful part of life. And I'm saying that having not really gone through the full journey yet, but let's explore the Uranus opposition. I'm just going to give us a really sweeping, overarching feel for this with some questions at the end that you can take with you and explore. So let's get into it. The Uranus opposition occurs in our early 40s and happens when Uranus is in the opposing sign to our natal placement. So in my case, I have Uranus in Sagittarius, and we have just begun, as I'm sitting here chatting with you all right now, Uranus in Gemini, and that journey that will be going on for about the next 7 years. And Uranus takes about 7 years to move through every single sign, and it takes about 84 years for Uranus to do a full circle through all 12 zodiac signs. So around the age of 42 is when we'll often have that exact opposition. And this is a really powerful time of illumination and clarifying. And you'll notice right away that the early 40s are often talked about in this kind of midlife crisis language. And part of the reason I really think that that whole idea of midlife crisis as like kind of the 20th century answer to this age and this time in our life is because we lack ritual, recognition, and support for entering into a deeper part of life that comes with a whole new set of questions, a whole new set of lenses, gifts, abilities, and different ways of communing with the physical and the non-physical. That's a really powerful spiritual journey to go on. And when you live in a culture that's very youth obsessed, productivity obsessed, holding on to control and linear narrative obsessed, it's going to feel very challenged by something like this midlife point. It's going to feel like that's not allowed in the rules of this culture. So we just kind of cast it aside as the midlife crisis and just say, oh yeah, that's going on. Don't look over there too much. But I'm hoping that in our chat today about the Uranus opposition, we can reclaim some of the power, the ritual, the magic, and the importance of this time as a time of sacred connection, coming home to ourselves, and revitalization. Because Uranus is often nicknamed the Great Awakener, which is quite the title. I mean, wow, how do you even take that in? What does that even mean, right? What are we awakening to? You know, we like to use the word awakening, but what does that really mean? I like to think about Uranus as really curious, like some of the most curious energy we can work with. It wants to know, it wants to figure out how we can use our intellect and our thoughts to think in different ways, to reconnect to things, to invent and explore and experiment in life. And that often will help us to recognize and come out of old patterns of family systems, old cultural systems, old identities. It can help us to see and think in new ways, invent new ways of moving with ourselves, but also recognize and be able to connect with who we truly are. And I think it's so important to be able to frame the Uranus opposition as a time of self-realization, coming home to ourselves, and a curiosity about who we are, a care for who we are. Because sometimes when we're talking about Saturn returns or Uranus oppositions or any of these like deeper themed transits that are pretty famous in the astrology world, there's often this kind of emphasis on tower moments, on crises, on these sifting moments where everything falls apart and we have to find ourselves. And of course, that is one modality that we learn about ourselves in life. And at this point, by the time, if we're lucky enough to get into our 40s, if we're lucky enough to have lived to this point, our lives have fallen apart a few times already. We have some wisdom in our satchels that we're carrying with us. We have information. We know what it feels like to transform several times. We know what it feels like to fail and fall flat on our face, or to disappoint people, or to realize we can't keep doing this one thing. And all of that wisdom is coming into this 7-year cycle, which slowly and steadily helps us come home to ourselves. So that's one of the first things I want to say is take your time. Take your time moving into this. Don't feel like you have to come home to yourself overnight, or like you have to know everything, or you have to, shed a skin overnight. So this opposition, let's talk a little bit more about like what to expect from this opposition. I think the big thing about this opposition is that, like I said, it is a symbolic and energetic, important point in entering the second half of life, which can feel a little intimidating. There might be a part of us that wants to hold on to all of the goals and trappings of the first half of life. There's a part of us that might be a little intimidated by this transformation, but our souls and our curious selves are really ready for this transformation, because we are entering into the second half of life where we have a much more spiritual perspective, and we are starting to see things from the much bigger picture. Not so much obsessing about what we get and how we get it and what our reputation is in the world, and much more interested in the bigger picture and the bigger connected weaving. Because by this point, many of us have lost people along the way. We've seen that things come and they go. We're no longer able to just pretend like if I just keep going along my way, everything will stay the same. We are already initiated into a deeper understanding. And this is a choice point, really, about how we want to engage with the second half of our life, how we want to enter into it. And it's a process as well of continuing to choose ways that feel good to our system. So some of the themes that can come up working with the Uranus opposition are wanting freedom from the past, clearing away old ties, healing inner children who are wanting to be rescued, who are waiting there. They might get louder and really, really be ready to integrate and release, redefining our roles in life, not who we've been in old family systems that we've maybe secretly carried around with us all the way up to this point, trying to please parents, trying to please bosses, coworkers, systems that we're living in. All of that is starting to come into question during this opposition. Once again, Uranus wants to shake things up, wants to stir things up, wants to help us see ourselves with clearer vision, not just who we've been told to be, not who we've been told to put our little costume on and be small, but to really see ourselves. The oppositions help us like a mirror, like a great illuminator that can help us really get perspective. Exploration of what really brings us life. Like, what brings you life? Like, what do you actually enjoy? What's actually fun? What is just not fun at all? Letting go of societal standards of beauty. This is a really interesting and powerful time in a person's life, because this can be a time of actually having more fun with clothes, with makeup, with identity, with how we express ourselves. Like that's one really healthy way to work with the Uranus opposition. Just play around with it. This can also be a time where there's a part of us that's scared of aging, that's scared of changing form, and might even hold on a little bit more tightly to all the trappings of youth and try to hold. And that's totally understandable because this is a big initiation. This is a big stepping into new roles, new identities, new visions. So there are going to be parts of us that feel a little intimidated, that feel a little tender, that need care. And like, I always like to think about this kind of conversation as that kind of classic midlife crisis that gets kind of pigeonholed over there is like, oh yeah, where, you know, you kind of hold on a little tighter, you buy the fancy car, you try to get like a younger partner, whatever it might be. I mean, those are all like cliches, but it's an important and tender time. And I think especially for women in a culture that values youth and beauty in this very specific little like box, this can be a time that feels very vulnerable, but also really empowering. And I think both of those happen together, you know, that it's not either one or the other. Either you're just one of those brave, evolved people, or you're scared the whole time. I think it's really both. Working on seeing life from the bigger picture. Like I said, this is a time when we might really start to get more deeply into our abilities when it comes to non-physical. So our intuition can improve. Our ability to see through things can improve. Our ability to connect with the other side can improve. We can have really powerful experiences of deep spiritual connection at this time that can really help us walk into the next stage of life. And this is just one of those times where we're entering into the deeper themes of life. It can bring deep questions about mortality, values, lifestyles, perspectives, energetic realms. It can bring in a lot of new information. It can bring a lot of revelation about who we are and how we come home to ourselves. And I can't even tell you, I haven't lived this journey yet. So I am sitting here as a novice on the Uranus opposition path myself. So it's interesting to talk about it without having moved through it properly. But I am intrigued. And I just wanted to end this little chat with some questions that I think are really beautiful to explore if you are working with your Uranus opposition. Maybe you're at the tail end of one, or maybe you're just beginning. And these are questions you can, of course, ask anytime in life. These are always great questions. They just might feel amplified during these years of working through this process. So, what value systems or expectations feel like they don't fit me anymore? I think this is really crucial to the Uranus opposition. Uranus is a very intellectually stimulating energy that will often help us to see things with fresh eyes. What do I just not care about as much as I used to? This is also a really big Uranus opposition, where things that we might have been working hard on our whole lives to hold together, we just cannot care anymore. What are those? Interesting to see what comes up. What are my biggest fears about letting myself change? Because this is a time of initiation into really becoming our true selves, removing some of the identities we've felt we've had to carry, removing some of the self-censorship, and coming home, there can be parts of us that feel that is dangerous. So it's interesting to check in with the parts that feel scared or intimidated by this journey. Do I feel allowed to pursue a life of fulfillment and depth at this point? Or is that too selfish? Is that too naive? Why or why not? Who do I think I will let down if I just become more myself? This is important. I think as we enter into this era, we are going to feel that we are disappointing some old expectations, some people. Who are they? What is the message there? What elements of the first half of my life do I need to fully grieve and allow to leave? Now, that's a long process, one that does very well with some helpers, some therapists, some groups that really can support you, because that is not an overnight journey. But what elements of the first half of my life am I allowed to let go? What stories or paradigms from the first half of my life don't really work anymore, even when I try to apply them and keep things running smoothly? What's not working anymore? What would feel like a relief to let go of, even if it feels scary at first? That's a fun one. What natural preferences are arising at this time? You might notice that your preferences are getting very loud and a little bit more difficult to ignore. And this can also make other people uncomfortable when boundaries and preferences are just naturally arising from you. You say, I have the capacity for this and not for this right now. I have an interest in this and I really don't have an interest in this right now. Those kinds of opinions and self-knowledge and what I would call a self-intuition start to become a lot louder and clearer during this season of life. What gifts are starting to peek out and show themselves? What gifts are trying to express themselves? This is also a time when many of us will uncover and discover new talents, new interests, new ways of connecting with community, giving of our gifts. Like, this can be a totally rebirth time where what we were trying to do the first half of our life kind of starts to fall away as we enter into communion with our new gifts and ideas. So what are you noticing is starting to pique your interest and show up more? Am I allowed to enjoy and allow my changing self to emerge? Why or why not? I think this is such a beautiful time right at the beginning, and this is something I'm doing in this process of just like really allowing myself to believe that this next season is the most beautiful, that the best is yet to come, that my gifts are just beginning, that my ability to express and show up is just being born right now, and that I am going to go on that journey with deep curiosity, compassion for myself, and a determination to really hear and listen to those gifts. And this is really important work. And I am so curious. I want to hear from you. Have you moved through your Uranus opposition? What did that feel like? If you have, if you've lived through it, what were some of the themes, lessons, insights that came for you? I know many people have very deep experiences during this time. And I don't want to belittle that at all. Everybody's going to be different with how that shows up and what that looks like. Truly, truly, everybody has their own path to walk when it comes to something like this. But I'd love to hear what themes came up for you when you were moving through this. If you are just beginning the journey and you're with me on that journey, what are you most curious about? What feels like it's a little intimidating? What are you noticing about yourself already sitting here at the beginning of that journey? And what questions do you have about the Uranus opposition? What's something that comes up for you when you think about this? I would love to hear. And that brings me into, I just want to mention that I do a practice and a modality of exploring the unconscious and the wild nature through what I call wild dreaming. And we are working with some very powerful wild dreaming right now over on my Patreon, which is super affordable. We do art practices, journal practices, visualizations, and they really help us to just listen to our intuition and bring up raw, wild intuition from the unconscious. It's a really beautiful practice. It's something that I've been developing for the last year or so. And it's really been one of the most beautiful things. I'd love to offer that space to you. If you're looking for places to really land and empower yourself, I'd love to see you there. I love it when you are here. We have so much more to talk about in the coming weeks. I hope you will subscribe, leave me a comment, engage a little bit. It really helps me to continue to share this work. I'm so appreciative to have you here. I can't wait to hear your thoughts, and I will see you back here again so very soon.